I'm Dale Lawrence. Welcome to the Travel Show. Thanks for joining us. In this week's Travel Show, I'll be discussing aviation issues with the head of the Board of Airline Representatives here in Thailand. We'll also be rounding up the latest news in the world of travel and tourism. But first, here's a story to warm everyone's hearts, as some 20 executive chefs in Bangkok and Thailand team up to raise much-needed funds for underprivileged children. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Amazing Thailand, just as amazing as you remember.
I'm joined by Kun Pacharin, Kun Nuntia Hamangong, co-directors of Gourmet One, and the driving force, the inspiration behind the Bangkok Chefs Charity Dinner. Ladies, thank you very much for joining me on the Travel Show. Kun Pacharin, first of all, what inspired you to start with this charity dinner? A couple of years ago now, the first event was in 2009, wasn't it? What was the inspiration behind this fundraising event?
Because on January 2008, we have a chance to traveling up to the north to see Royal Project, to visit the Royal Project, and we have a chance to see the school of the Hill Tribe student and how the Hill Tribe people they live up north. The quality of living is much less than the quality of living of Thai people because they are two nationality. And we have seen that a lot of kids, they don't have enough classroom. They only have the roof and the floor. They don't have something proper for them. And especially on the winter season, they're freezing cold. And for the young student, just kindergarten, 3 years old, they don't have a lot of toys and they have to sitting and study. It's very cold weather. So with all the chefs, we agree that we wanted to raise some fund and to help the children more.
Now, your first dinner, Kun Nuntia, your first charity dinner in 2009 raised, I think, about 3.5 million baht.
That's right.
for these children in need. And that really then encouraged you to organise the event again last year. That raised, I think, just over 5 million baht.
That's right, 5 million.
So in about 6 weeks' time, you're going to be having your third charity dinner, once again at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel. 9-course.
9-course dinner.
Wonderful dinner being prepared by 20 executive chefs from Bangkok and other leading hotels in Thailand. How much money are you hoping to raise this year?
This year, we expect about 6 million up, maybe, because if the auction is very successful from last year. So this year, we may make it more than 6 million. Because everyone, they know well that all this money is go for a good cause.
Indeed.
Without any expense deduct.
Yes, I mean, clearly you're the driving force behind the event. You've persuaded 20 top chefs, and you've got a culinary expert as well from Thai Airways, I believe, helping you this year.
Yes.
Now, how are ticket sales going? This dinner is taking place on the 4th of August. Is it still possible to get a ticket?
I have to say sorry because next year, right now we have standby already for next year.
Standby already?
Standby, right, because all is repeating guests. And everybody say that they're gonna buy it every year. So it's like repeating guests. We have not much new coming guests to join us this year, so
well,
it's
now,
already full.
it's not a cheap dinner by any means. I mean, the ticket price is 8,888 baht.
That's right.
I guess a lot of people just round it up perhaps to 9 or 10,000 because they know it's going to a good cause. Your company, Gourmet One, you import fine foods and wines from around the world, don't you? And I believe you're donating produce to be cooked for that dinner, is that correct?
That's
Yes.
right.
And every course, each of the 9 courses, is accompanied by a fine wine, either Old World or New World. So the guests, even though you're asking them to part with a substantial sum of money, actually they're getting a fantastic dinner for the price, aren't they?
Yes. So what we do is Gourmet One will sponsor all the raw ingredient, and all this money will go directly to charity.
And you mentioned about an auction as well, and I think our good friend in the media, Valin Sachideo, is going to be your master of ceremonies.
That's right.
What are people bidding for in the auction?
They're bidding for the chef because we having whoever wants the auction, they will take the chef. The chef going to do outside catering, cooking for them homes, and all the ingredients will be prepared from the hotel.
So the chefs will go to people's homes,
Yes,
and
they're
actually
cooking
prepare a fantastic
6-course
meal.
dinner for 6 to 8 people for the normal auction. And we also have the grand auction. The grand auction starting bidding from 100,000 baht. Whoever won the auction, they can choose 4 chefs out of 20 chefs.
Oh, you get to choose the chefs.
Yes, this is a grand auction. You can choose any one of them, 4 of them. They're going to cook for 12 people.
Well, we wish you every success with your Bangkok Chefs Charity Dinner for 2011. I'm convinced you're going to raise the 6 million baht you're looking for, and we hope you'll raise much more. And thank you very much for talking to us on the Travel Show. My thanks to Kun Patrin and Kun Nuntia Hamungung from Gourmet One. After the break, I'll be talking to 2 of the executive chefs supporting this very worthy cause. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Amazing Thailand always amazes you.
Welcome back. Now I'm joined now by 2 of the executive chefs that have teamed up for this charity dinner. Mark Hagenbach from the Grand Hyatt, where we're speaking today, and Norbert Costa from the Mandarin Oriental Hotel. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. Mark, this is your first year, isn't it, taking part in this charity dinner? What's attracted you to becoming part of this executive chef's team, if you like?
Well, I think it's an exciting opportunity to meet and work with fellow chefs, professionals in the industry, as well as working with a fantastic charity organisation that Gourmet One have put together. I think to be able to be a part of that and give up some of your time is very important, but it's also a lot of fun for us as well.
But you know, the outside world, the general public, always have this belief that chefs are very competitive. There's a lot of rivalry. Presumably you've had to set, or you will have to set rivalry aside when you prepare this dinner on the 4th of August.
Well, not necessarily. I think there's a lot of friendly banter. We're all here for the same cause. We're all here to support the charity. We're not here for ego and you know, promoting ourselves. We're here as a team to get together and really learn from each other and have a great time.
Norbert, executive chef of the Mandarin Oriental Hotel, you're described as the cuisine director for this gastronomic feast that you're going to be preparing.
Yeah, okay, we have done it for 2 years already. This is the 3rd year, and we always do it at the Oriental Hotel because it started out there. So I think it's more than normal that I am the conductor. You see, but at the best conductor in the world, without a good orchestra, we'll go nowhere.
Well, now you described yourself as perhaps the conductor of this impressive team of executive chefs, but the art of being a conductor is making sure that everyone's in tune and in good time, keeping good time.
We did already training. You know, nothing happened without training. You know, you cannot put 21, 22 chefs just there and say cook.
Mark, it's not just about preparing this wonderful meal on the night, is it? It's about raising much needed funds for underprivileged children in Thailand. And I think you get a chance, in fact all the chefs get a chance to meet some of these children in the weeks and months ahead to see how the money that's being raised is being put to good use.
Definitely, that is the whole underlying story about the Chef's Charity with the support from Gourmet One. It's all about giving back to the community and what we can do in the future with the money. The money is handled very well, very professionally. It's all transparent, what we do for the community and where the money goes. And I think that is the underlying story for the whole thing. Yes, you're going out for a great meal and a great dining experience, but the bottom line is we're here for giving back to the charity. And I think that's the important thing that needs to stay in focus.
After the break, I'll be talking to one of the region's leading aviation industry executives. But first, here's a roundup of the latest news. Dusit International is to expand into the United States hotel sector with its Dusit D2 brand. A 136-room hotel will open in Pasadena, California next year. The company operates 2 hotels in Thailand under the Dusit D2 brand, in Chiang Mai and Pattaya, and there are also plans to launch the brand next year in New Delhi. By 2015, China could be the world's #1 international tourism source market. That's the view of Professor Wolfgang Alt, director of the China Outbound Tourism Research Institute. He told delegates at a tourism conference in Queensland that from 1995 to 2010, global tourism figures increased by 73%, whilst for Chinese tourists, the numbers grew by 815%. And with the Australian tourism industry providing more than 500,000 jobs and generating some 34 billion Australian dollars in revenue, capturing a portion of this growing market could have a significant effect on Australia's economy.
With crystal clear waters and beautiful mountains, this is paradise on earth. Khao Lak in Phang Nga province is the place to restore your batteries in the tranquil surrounds. But there's a lot to do here, like taking a stroll down the Khao Lak Lam Ru National Park course, which leads you past these amazing human-sized footprints. And after taking in the beauty of the forest, the path leads straight to the beach where you can enjoy a perfect sunset. This is the place to get romantic, so bring a special someone.
Amazing Thailand, just as amazing as you remember.
The aviation industry, particularly in this region, is facing some major challenges, not least with the price of oil continuing to rise. In the wake of the global economic downturn and other crises such as SARS and swine flu, some airlines, yes, are returning to profitability, but challenges remain. Join me after the break when I talk to the President of the Board of Airline Representatives here in Thailand, as Brian Sinclair Thompson goes on the record. Brian Sinclair Thompson, thank you very much for going on the record. Brian, your role as President of the Board of Airline Representatives is to represent the interests of the international carriers here in Thailand, isn't it? But you must feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall sometimes. Is that the case?
Well, there is always an element of head to brick syndrome when you're in an advocacy role. But I'm a firm believer in the need for dialogue and constructive discussion between the authorities and the carriers, lest they forget that we are their customers in many of the roles that they perform in providing air navigation and air services to the airlines. And the real concern that I have, and it's an ongoing one, is we don't want to read about changes to our business arena in the newspapers. We want to be able to have some prior warning as to what's going on and try, where possible, to have a say in the way the industry is being framed, and particularly when it comes to issues such as cost, security and safety.
And is your voice being heard by people of influence in government?
I think more and more. It's ironic that if I look back at the 7 years I've been in the role as president, many of the things we recommended prior to the opening of Suvarnabhumi, for instance, are now being acted on. So it's a sort of a delayed take-up, if you like, in suggestions.
So better late than never in some respects.
Exactly.
Now, you mentioned Suvarnabhumi Airport, Brian, and of course it was in 2008, wasn't it, November 2008, that we had the airport closure.
Yes.
With protesters taking over the airport for several days, causing massive disruption to airlines, to freight operators, and most importantly to passengers. The Democrat government came to power shortly after that protest. I think it's fair to say that what had happened at Suvarnabhumi Airport put tourism near the top of the cabinet agenda in the early part of that administration, but it didn't last, did it? I mean, other issues seemed to take priority as that government spent more time in office. So, I mean, is there ever going to be a situation where a government here in Thailand truly understands the importance of aviation and tourism to the nation's GDP and really also promotes openly and actively an open skies policy?
I think definitely that situation with the closure report demonstrated just how important having, as I call it, a front door to Thailand that opens and closes efficiently is to attracting visitors and investors to the kingdom. I've seen since then a lot of insightful thinking from the authorities in terms of the value of tourism, the value of the tourism receipts, and how they've marched up the GDP ladder in terms of what it means to the country. And of course we've seen huge amounts of infrastructure development since the closure of the airport. I said at the time, and I say again, that what we did then was teach people how to get to their destinations via other means. And we've now got that onerous task, as we do with so many other external influences, of attracting that traffic back that we lost. But having said that, of course, on the national agenda since those days, we've had a lot of other things to deal with: natural disasters, flooding, earthquakes in the region.
And the global economic recession, of course,
exactly.
which impacted airlines generally, and of course, your own employer. I mean, you're also here in your capacity as regional manager for Swiss. So, I mean, you had obviously real challenges facing your particular airline in the wake of that global economic downturn.
We did, and what we've got to try to do now is to balance the supply and demand. And when we see the demand dropping, we've got to somehow be able to adjust our scheduling, and so we're not overexposed in the market with gone are the days when we can fly aircraft around with half empty seats. I think we've got to make every seat and every kilo pay if we're to meet the fuel bills. And we've got to remember that it's a bare 3 years ago that we were paying $38 a barrel for oil, and we're now paying something over 100. We place a lot of emphasis on our inventory management, our revenue management system, which drives those seats at an optimal cost. Having said that, however, we are not insensitive to changes in the market and, of course, competition. And I know that the focus on the Middle East, for instance, right now brings into play what we do to match that. And I think For instance, at Swiss, we've pushed ourselves to the quality end of the market. We've just introduced a new life at business class across our long-haul fleet. We've dedicated a first-class section to all of our long-haul aircraft. We like to pride ourselves on providing an at-home feeling in the aircraft and comforts and amenities that are beholden by travellers who are expecting a little bit more. Of course, we then try to charge for that, and the trick is to make sure that we can deliver on the service so passengers come back and enjoy our service again.
Indeed. Well, we know that the national airline, Thai Airways, has recognised the importance of upgrading, certainly its economy class product on long-haul services into destinations such as Frankfurt and London, which at the moment they're using fairly ancient 747s with no individual flight entertainment systems, and the President recognises that that's meant a loss of business.
Absolutely, and we encourage the upgrade of all of, whether it's competitors or in the case of Thai where we enjoy a code share, we like to think that if you are flying Thai on a Swiss code, you're going to get a similar product than you would expect from us
But it can be a lottery, right? It really depends what aircraft you happen to be flying on. I mean, to be fair to Thai, if you fly on one of their 777s, it's a very, very good product, whichever cabin you're sitting in. But it's the older 747s which serve, as I said, cities such as London, which are way behind many of their competitors now.
Yes, and you probably see the catchphrase with a lot of airlines, one of the world's youngest fleets. But then if you have a look at the order books, there's a bit of a bottleneck there in waiting now for new aircraft types and variants to come onto the market to be available to customer airlines. So I sympathise with Thai in so much that they're upgrading aging fleet. I can only encourage them and say, look, excellent, and you're doing this.
We'll talk more about what airlines are doing a little bit later on, Brian, but I just want to bring you back to Suvarnabhumi Airport in particular. Somewhat surprisingly last year, one organisation named it Airport of the Year 2010. This was the Centre for Asia Pacific Aviation. I mean, this is despite the fact I think most passengers, certainly most industry analysts would state that Bangkok is lagging way behind its regional competitors.
I think it's got aspirations to do that, and there are corrections going, as I mentioned previously, things that we'd suggested or advocated years ago are now being put into practice. But let's first look at the fact that Suvarnabhumi, to me, is an extremely well-situated facility. I don't think anywhere in the world could you have built an airport in the last 5 years so close to town. If we look at Mumbai, for instance, the new airport that they're contemplating, there's going to be about 2.5 hours travel from the downtown area of Mumbai. So we've got a wonderful facility that's bisected by two major arterial roadways. We've now got the new rail link, and I think the fine-tuning of Suvarnabhumi is one thing, but the real genesis is the fact that it needs to grow. The next phase of development of Suvarnabhumi is very urgently required, and that's one of our frustrations, that while we understand the budgets have been considered and even let, we have yet to see ground being broken for the midfield terminal. And although there are detractors from the need for the third runway, if we were to look at the fact that in the last 2 years, one of the two existing runways has had to be closed for remedial works, it suddenly halves the capacity of an airport per hour from somewhere around 90 movements to 40. And that's why the third runway is really absolutely necessary to give the flexibility should one of the existing runways require repair.
And we've just been reading about the plans for Hong Kong at Chek Lap Kok to create
a third runway at a cost which will exceed the entire development of that whole airport to date. And so it gives you a good indication of where Hong Kong wants to position itself in terms of the premier gateway to southern China.
Let's switch airports in Bangkok, if we may,
Yes.
and talk about Dong Mueang, which of course until 4 or 5 years ago was Bangkok's international airport. Do you support the idea of maintaining Dong Mueang as an airport for, say, no-frills, budget airlines?
I don't, essentially. I think that the low-cost carriers know where their feed and defeed are coming from. And primarily that's the main hub of Suvarnabhumi. And we were promised a single airport solution for Bangkok before Suvarnabhumi opened. I think Don Mueang has a secondary role as a maintenance base, as a base for charter operations, for aviation training, and possibly VIP flights.
Yeah.
And therefore that it should be maintained. But I can assure you that behind the scenes, all of the authorities have advocated and asked me to lobby for a single airport solution.
And that would be the advice that you would give to the next Minister of Transport?
Absolutely, 100%.
Brian Sinclair Thompson, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. We'll be back with more after this short break.
Amazing Thailand always amazes you.
Yachts aren't just for well-heeled international high flyers. You might not believe you're still in Thailand, but here at the Royal Phuket Marina, you can sail to the stunning islands of the Andaman in complete style. The marina also boasts an excellent shopping plaza called Times Square, and if you're feeling peckish, you can choose from a range of mouth-watering international fare at one of the many restaurants within the complex. Visit the Royal Phuket Marina now to experience a touch of class in Thailand.
Brian, let's come on to the touchy subject of airfares. One of the criticisms that's aimed at airlines is that carriers are very quick to put up the prices when the oil price does go up, but are not quite so quick to reduce their airfares in times of better pricing for oil. Is that a fair criticism, do you think?
Yes. One observation in my role is that I've got to balance the demand by our members for lower costs, for reductions, for incentives on fixed costs and operation, with the need for investment. Because as we've talked already, there is dire need to get increased terminal facility here in Bangkok. And surprisingly, having a look around the marketplace, I found that the airfares, for instance, from Bangkok to Europe at the moment are cheaper than they've been in the last 10 years. And without mentioning names, lead-in prices of under 15,000 baht before taxes and surcharges are not uncommon.
You know, you talked about a lead-in fare, 15,000 baht, say, return to Europe out of Bangkok. But passengers, of course, paying twice that. And that brings me on to the next issue, and that's one of transparency. Now, if you take an airline, very reputable, successful airline like Singapore, Singapore Airlines make it perfectly clear in all their advertising that the price in the advertisement is the price you pay. Their quoted fares include surcharges and taxes. And yet there are many other airlines that put 15,000 baht in very large print and in very, very small print, excluding fuel and other taxes and surcharges. It's misleading the public, isn't it?
Well, I think buyer beware in that regard, and make sure you do read the small print as you would with any insurance policy that you took out, etc. But no, I agree. The all-inclusive pricing is one solution, although that then gives rise to the need that this fuel surcharge, and I get this from a lot of quarters, you know, it goes up when fuel goes up. Why doesn't it come down when fuel comes down? And the reality there is the fuel surcharge is probably at best collecting about 50% maximum of the real cost of the fuel to an airline. So we're still always behind the 8 ball when it comes to covering those fixed cost increases.
Brian Sinclair Thompson, thank you very much for going on the record.
My pleasure.
Well, my thanks to Brian and indeed to all our guests, and also to the Sheraton Grand Sukhumvit and the Grand Hyatt Erawan hotels for their hospitality. So until the same time next week, from everyone on the Travel Show, it's goodbye.